Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Undermine Propaganda. My name is Lisa. It is August 13th, 2026, Thursday morning. First, thank you to everybody that's been engaging with any of my videos. Greatly, greatly appreciate all of you guys. And real quick, here is a list of the current subscribers and the new ones: Doozy, Magwaza, Matthias, Mayor, Eshe, Walid Cosplay, Instagram, and Abdullah John. And forgive my pronunciations, please, but thank you to you guys and to everybody for that matter for engaging in any way. I greatly, greatly appreciate all of you guys. All right. It's not that we should, by this time in 2026, be past the ridiculous justifications for the genocide, ongoing, by the way, genocide in Gaza, but yet we continue to platform and allow these people to spew, these Zionist propagandists to spew abject lies, distortion of the truth about what has happened in Gaza and what continues to happen in Gaza, about Israel and their actions and their lack of humanity. But we still are doing that. We still are doing that. These people will not stop. In fact, they are going harder now. The Zionists and the Zionist project and the people that are at the forefront of this are going much, much harder because they know and they see that they are losing the battle in the Western world, who they've had captured for many, many, many decades, who have been on the Zionist side, who have supported Israel no matter what. Well, things are shifting, and these are shifting further and more profoundly than they ever have. Still not quick enough. But for this example, it was yet another episode of Piers Morgan. He had on Owen Jones, who is a British commentator, a supporter of Palestinian rights, supporter of human rights. You would think we're human. We should all be supporters of human rights. However, it can be difficult to find these people in our twisted, demented Western world sometimes. Anyway, Owen Jones is on a panel on Piers Morgan this past week debating Josh Hammer, who is a depraved Zionist who will spew the most insane twisting of the truth, of the actual facts on the ground, of the horrific nature of the IDF and what they have done in Gaza to innocent men, women, and children. And like I always say, continue to, because it's so important, I believe, for us to remember that this has not stopped. This imaginary ceasefire, Israel has killed more Palestinians since this ceasefire than Hamas killed on October 7th, 2023. So that is just absolute garbage. Again, something to put out there to try to quell people, quiet the protests, and get people to quit talking about it. Well, we won't. People won't quit talking about it. And as I start to play this debate, if you're aligned in any way to the way my brain works, you will begin to feel the rage well up in you as Josh Hammer repeats complete lies about what happened on October 7th and about what is continuing to happen in Gaza and about Israel's actions. Owen Jones does a great job pushing back and bringing up facts and shutting him down. And he actually makes Josh look like the whimpering coward Zionist that he is. And for a change, Piers Morgan is actually calling him out on stuff and being more and more aggressive towards a stance on Israel. Far too late. He sees the winds of change happening, so he is jumping on board what is more palatable to his audience is what's going on there. But we'll take it, whatever. Anyway, enough of me going on and on here. Let's go ahead and take a look at this debate, and we'll go through it together and see what you guys think. Okay, here we go. Piers just basically starts out by asking Owen Jones what he feels is the reason there's been such a turn against Israel in the world, but specifically in the Western Hemisphere, in the opinions of Israel, and what his thoughts are on why that may be. So let's go ahead and take a listen.
Root of many problems here. Do you feel vindicated by the turn in global public opinion, particularly in America, in the last 2 years or so?
Well, just to be clear, that's not exactly the thesis. It's the idea that the West, with its endless, disastrous, catastrophic wars, including supporting Israel's genocide, of course, that is a Western war, or genocide even, and as well as its economic model, has brought the West into existential crisis. It's the people who used the victory in the Cold War as they saw it to get high on their own supply and have caused a global catastrophe, not just for the West, but for millions of people across the world. But yeah, I mean, look what's happened with Israel's genocide in terms of Western public opinion, because in the US, it used to be impossible to speak out about Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people. And now, more Americans than not, by a large margin, believe Israel quite correctly has committed genocide, as per the consensus of genocide scholars, including Israeli genocide scholars. They want arms to Israel to be ended. They have more sympathy with the Palestinians now than they do with Israel, which is the first time that's ever happened. Amongst younger Republicans, there's been a massive shift against Israel. But I think what Israel has shown, and I think this is why it's so indicative of the wider fall of the West, if you like, is the West has lost its military supremacy, destroyed in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and now Iran. It's losing its economic supremacy because of the economic model it had, but it's also lost its moral supremacy. And that moral claim the West had to be...
And he makes some good points there as far as the West, America, losing its economic superiority. And with this war in Iran showing that we've lost our military superiority. As far as the moral superiority, I would argue, Owen, we never had it. That we have always behaved like a bully, trying to bend the entire world to our will, which our will being is to enrich the most powerful and elite in the world and here in America. So we would rob and pillage all over the entire world with impunity. So, and it's just gotten more obvious and more blatant. It was always there. So I would argue with Owen on that. We aren't losing. It has just been revealed more, and people realize that the United States never had moral clarity.
The champion of freedom and democracy and human rights was buried in the mass grave of the crime scene of Gaza, along with tens of thousands of Palestinians, including children. And that's the point. The West no longer has moral, economic, and military supremacy. And it's frankly partly down, no offense to the guest who, I didn't know who he was, I had to Google him, but that the sort of politics that he has promoted has brought the West to ruin.
Amy Acton's lies inspire violence.
All right, Josh Hammer,
Sorry
once
about
he
that.
Googled you, he realised that you were part of the problem. Your response?
Well, Piers, I had to Google my interlocutor as well. I never heard of him, and I probably will never hear from him again after the show, and that's probably best just for the both of us. Look, there's so much to respond to. It's hard to know where to begin. Piers, I think the viewers would
just
probably
to be clear, hang on. Before we go any further, just to be clear, neither of you had to Google me, right?
Oh my
I definitely
gosh.
you up, Piers, don't worry about it.
Put your ego away, Piers.
So
I wouldn't go that far, Owen, but Josh, go on.
I think it would probably be instructive for the viewers of this program, listening to Owen Jones, listening to Trank Uyghur, Dave Smith, just casually throw about the term genocide. They say with such confidence, with such assertiveness, with not even the slightest hint of questioning their word choice, their diction, that there's a genocide in Gaza. Piers, I have here on my desk a rock. The viewers can see this, the listeners can only take my word that I'm holding a rock in my hand. The rock I'm holding in my hand is from the crematorium at Auschwitz. That is a genocide. A genocide is where all of the mass industrial tools of a nation are oriented towards the singular goal of eliminating from the face of the earth a certain type of people with full deliberation and full intentionality, rounding them up in gas chambers, in mass graves, in all of the various horrific atrocities that the Holocaust entails. We can debate.
Okay, first I have to stop. When I first heard that and heard him talking like I said earlier when I started this video, I could feel rage well up in me because the blatant lies and the way he just throws out, like, people are just pulling the word genocide out of their ass when a huge number of human rights organizations, including Israeli human rights organizations, have classified this as a genocide. And then he talks about how rounding up people and putting them in gas chambers and mass graves. They found mass graves. They've just started finding more mass graves in Gaza. People that had IVs still attached to them. People that were handcuffed and blindfolded that were thrown into mass graves. That is just one example of what's going on in Gaza. Children sniped in the head, in the heart. Sniping doesn't happen by accident. So it's just absolutely enraging, and he knows what he's doing, and the pure evilness of knowing that you're blatantly lying to cover the genocide of an entire innocent population of human beings. Okay, let's continue.
What has happened in Gaza for the past few years? We can debate certain tactics. We can debate whether the IDF has done enough when it comes to calling up individual homes and dropping leaflets. We could talk about the international law of proportionality. We could talk about the Geneva Conventions. We could talk about the fact that it is the most humane civilian to combatant death ratio in the modern history of urban warfare. We can get into all this. But what we have to get to, at least those of us who are reasonable, and Piers, I know sometimes you struggle for reasonable guests, operating within the Overton window of normal discourse, of non-hyperbolic, of non-catastrophic discourse. This is a war, and lest the viewers forget, it is a war started by Hamas. It was a war started on October 7, 2023.
Okay, another thing. It is not a war. It is not a war. The Palestinian people in Gaza are a captive, occupied population that have no Army, Air Force, Navy. They don't have, this is not a war. This is a captive population that have been captive, that have been occupied for decades upon decades upon decades, and pushed further and further and further and further towards the sea. Blocked by the IDF, by Israel, who only allows small amounts of things to get in, who keeps them on a certain caloric diet of so many calories just to keep them just above starvation. This is not a war. This is not a war, Josh. Okay, let's go ahead.
Lest we forget, there was a ceasefire, a full ceasefire in Gaza on October 6, 2023. What happened on October 7th was the equivalent of dozens of 9/11s. We were coming up on the 25th anniversary of 9/11. I remember it very well. I grew up in the New York area. I remember vividly seeing the smoke from the Twin Towers on that most fateful of days. What happened on October 7th was the functional equivalent on the death toll of dozens of 9/11s on American soil. The median American watching this program should ask him or herself, if this had happened in, let's call it Texas, if you had thousands of Sinaloa cartel commanders who came across the border and just blindly mutilated and raped and butchered, they put babies in ovens, they executed women point blank range on their home, how would the United States respond? How would we?
Okay, there's that again too. There were horrific things that happened on October 7th. However, the Zionists have taken anything and everything and fabricated complete narratives about what happened on October 7th to justify, which there is no justification, mind you, to justify what they have done and continue to do in Gaza. And putting babies in the ovens was one of those justifications, I should say fabrications, to justify the genocide. Complete and utter fabrication, not a scrap of evidence that ever happened. And he says rape in this little diatribe too. That's another thing, that there was no proof. There is proof of Israelis sexually assaulting Palestinians. It's on camera. It is on camera. And there was a whole New York Times article where victims came out. Victims that would not speak upon something like that if it had not happened. Very reliable sources in the New York Times to report that. And this guy is lying. And as far as the sexual assault of Israelis on October 7th, they'll say it is on that film. If you if you listen to Norman Finkelstein, who has said has gone through every last second of hours upon hours upon hours of footage on that day, there was nothing on that footage that showed sexual assault, systematic sexual assault. Whether it happened or not, none of us really can say for sure. But as far as them saying it was systematic and that they know for sure and that they saw it on video, and as far as a baby in the oven or being beheaded, complete fabrication, complete lies. Lies, 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 lies to justify the most horrendous events that in my lifetime, I've ever seen perpetrated on other human beings. So let's go ahead, I guess, and listen to him lie some more.
Response. These are the kind of questions that have gone so far removed from this debate, and no matter how many fancy words like genocide get perversely and morally incorrectly and legally incorrectly tossed around, I think it's incumbent upon all the reasonable people to ground themselves in the basic facts. And Owen Jones can laugh his sorry ass off who he wants. No one in the right mind really ought to give a crap.
Can I just respond to something you've just? Well, I'll respond if you let me to what you just said there. You just said babies were put in ovens on 7th of October. Why lie like that? You know that's a lie.
I'm not lying.
You know that never
I'm not
happened.
lying.
You know that never happened. You know not a single baby, one baby,
There's
which was a crime.
first-hand
Let me finish.
witness evidence of it.
You had a long spiel, and now I'm going to fact correct you because you can't just come on a show like this.
You don't do
I know
facts.
Piers likes
Genocide
accuracy. I know he likes accuracy in these discussions. No babies were put in an oven on 7th of October. One baby was killed on October 7th, which was bad enough. That's Mila Cohen. She was 8 months old. She was shot through the door of a safe room. That's the baby who was killed on 7th of October. That's a crime in itself. If that's a crime, which I say it is, by the way, how to describe 1,000 babies, 1,000 infants under the age of 1 killed in Gaza by Israel since 7th of October, and over 20,000 children. Now, just to respond to what you just said about genocide, I understand that you're a big fan of Donald Trump. I don't often quote Donald Trump approvingly, let's put it mildly. Last year, he said, and I quote, "A civilization has been wiped out in Gaza." Now, if I were to demand that a civilization was wiped out in Israel.
He didn't say it. He was threatening Iran trying to ceasefire and able. Sorry.
Again,
that's not.
I'm sorry,
totally wrong.
I'm sorry to fact correct you again, but he did say, quote, this is a verbatim. He said a civilization has been wiped out in Gaza, and he's absolutely right. Nearly every freestanding structure is damaged or destroyed. Almost every hospital's been attacked. Every school's been attacked. Most homes have been destroyed. Well over 100,000 people have been violently killed, according to every reputable study.
Also not true.
According to the Genocide Convention, it means any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. And that includes deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction.
There's no intent.
In whole or in part. Now, I would just note
this
quickly,
is so obvious.
Okay, I would just note with you, because you are a supporter of genocide, and I will make that very clear.
I am not.
You said about the Palestinian population of Gaza. You said this is a radicalized population that deserves shame, scorn, and diplomatic rebuke. You weren't talking about Hamas.
They deserve
You
all
talked
that.
about the Palestinian population of Gaza. That's what you said. You also said large swathes of Gaza should resemble a parking lot in October 2023. You also called for the population transfer of the people, the survivors of Gaza, into other Arab states. You want Palestinians removed from Gaza. You don't want Palestinians to remain in Gaza. That's what you called for. You also called for the military occupation or formal re-annexation of Gaza. That's what you also said.
February 2025.
Did you say that?
I never actually personally came out emphatically in favor of that, though. That's simply not true.
Did you say? Did you or did you not? I'm quoting for what you said. Did you not call for the population transfer of the people of Gaza?
No. First of all, I think it's a very reasonable option. By the way, there's a very long history of American presence.
It's a reasonable option. Ethnic cleansing is genocide. It is genocide. I just wanted to I would say go ahead and watch the entire interview, debate, whatever you want to call it. There's no debate anymore. But the fact of the matter is that Josh Hammer and people like him here in the Western world, specifically in the United States, are bigoted, extremist, Jewish supremacist, Zionist, evil, horrendous people that need to be called out, that need to be shamed, although I don't even know if these people have the capacity to feel shame. If you're going to defend something like that with a straight face and say the things that he says with a straight face after what we have witnessed and continue to witness, I don't believe you're capable of shame. But that's just me. But these people need to be called out. No more. No more. Israel and the Zionists, the Christian Zionists specifically here in America, are doing everything they can to shut down this kind of dialogue, to continue to get elected officials, to get people elected to office, to Congress, that are Zionists, that are AIPAC friendly. and they're losing all those battles, and they are pulling out all the stops, as we saw against Abdul al-Sayed up in Michigan. They put more than $30 million in a Dem primary. So they are not going to stop. They are going to, as they get more desperate, do more and more and more. And they have endless amounts of money to dump into these races. Not that I am somebody that thinks that electoral politics in any way is the solution to where we are at here in America, because I'm not. I believe that we need far more, shall I say, radical things, general strike, boycotts, a lot more than electoral politics to save us at this point. I think we're past that. But that being said, I don't believe that it does nothing. I believe it still is advantageous to get people elected to office that are anti-Zionist and that are promoting arms embargoes to Israel and those types of things. But I wanted to play that because I think we got to keep calling these people out, these monsters, for what they are. And I think Owen Jones does a really good job. Like I said, it's worth it to go and watch that whole entire debate because he does a great job. And Piers even jumps in there, which is absolutely amazing. But, you know, one more thing I wanted to show really quick. The numbers coming out that, I mean, really the ability to count the people that were killed in Gaza and are continuing to be killed it stopped years ago because there's no hospitals. There's no way to keep track of them. So this 70, 80,000 number is literally from years ago. So the true number, and many experts say it could literally be in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands. And to me, that's a very, very believable number. And when you see things like this, there was an article that just came out last week, I believe. Al Jazeera was reporting this. Israeli trucks out Gaza's rubble to hide genocide and redraw the map. They're literally hauling out piles, tons of rubble. Underneath that rubble are human beings. And they're getting rid of it. They're getting rid of the evidence because they still have not allowed journalists into Gaza. They still haven't allowed them out. So they're removing any bit of evidence, which there's so much evidence as it is, but there's so much more evidence because there's much more than 80,000 human beings that were slaughtered. The Israeli military is carting away millions of tons of rubble, including from cemeteries and known locations of human remains, and what rights groups say is an effort to erase war crimes evidence. And like I said, this was on August 5th, 2026, and then reported out by the Al Jazeera staff on August 13th, which is today, 2026. Israel is carrying out a massive organized operation to crush, mix, and transport millions of tons of rubble out of the Gaza Strip, according to human rights groups and monitors. The Israeli military systematic reshaping of the urban landscape comes against the backdrop of a staggering human toll, with at least 73,387 Palestinians. Like I said, that number is so outdated. It's from years ago. Mostly women and children killed since Israel's genocidal war on Gaza began in October 2023. So yeah, they're trying to hide there's so much evidence out there as it is, but they're still trying to hide other evidence of the horrific crimes against humanity that have been perpetrated with the support of the country I live in. And I've said before, I am ashamed of that. All right, guys. Just wanted to get that out there and show the little weaselly, lying Zionist piece of garbage spewing lies that I think at this point most people understand that they are lies. But there are still people that don't. So that I'm glad Owen Jones was on there to call it out, and Piers Morgan, and anybody else that's calling it out, more power to you. All right, that's all I have for today. As this Iran war drags on and our decrepit government continues to lie about the realities of that war, I will keep watching that and following that and maybe talk about that later this week, amongst many other things going on in our world today. All right, if you found anything of value, please like, subscribe, share, comment, let me know what you think. And like I said, subscribe, it's free. And importantly, I hope you guys find some peace in the rest of your day. Thank you guys so much for listening. Bye.